For 20 years, no one in the small town of Millfield had heard so much as a greeting from Harold Mays. He lived in the last house on Sycamore Lane, a stone cottage that looked as though time itself had forgotten it. Over the years, vines had crept across the brickwork, shingles had slipped from the roof, and the mailbox, overflowing with neglected letters, had rusted shut. Children whispered about him on their walk to school. Adults gave a polite nod from across the street, but never lingered. Harold wasn't always a mystery. Once, he'd been a teacher, beloved, respected, the kind of man who remembered every child's name and gave out books like they were treasure maps. But that was a different lifetime. That was before the accident. It was October 3rd, 2005, when the world tilted sideways. A drunk driver swerved onto the sidewalk outside Millfield Elementary. Harold had just picked up his 7-year-old daughter, Lily, from school. She was clutching a purple folder with a glittery star drawn on the front, her first Star Student Award. He never saw the car coming. The impact came like a bolt of thunder. Harold woke up in the hospital 3 days later to silence. Lily hadn't survived. From that moment on, Harold Mays stopped speaking. Not a single word to anyone, not the doctors, not the neighbors, not even his own brother, who had flown in from Chicago to manage the funeral. He left his job, disconnected his phone, and withdrew into the shadows of his grief. The world kept spinning, but Harold stood still. Years passed. People wondered if he was even still alive in that house. No one saw him leave. Grocery deliveries were left at the doorstep and vanished by morning. Once a year, a property tax check was mailed. That was the only proof he still existed. Until one spring morning, everything changed. It started with a water leak. Millfield had suffered its worst storm in decades. Tree branches crashed into power lines, and the roads flooded in less than an hour. Emergency services worked around the clock. After the storm cleared, a city worker named Eliza Tran was assigned to check for burst pipes along Sycamore Lane. When she knocked on Harold's door, she didn't expect an answer. But to her surprise, the door creaked open. "Hello," she called out, peering into the dim entryway. The air was heavy with dust and forgotten time. "Is anyone here?" "I'm with the city utilities." No response. Protocol told her to wait. Instinct told her to step in. The house was eerily quiet, like walking through a memory. Everything was untouched, preserved. Faded family photos on the mantel. A child's drawing pinned crookedly to the fridge. A pair of rain boots far too small for any adult, still by the back door. But what caught her attention most was the living room bookshelf. It was massive, spanning the entire wall. A library's worth of old hardcovers, all meticulously organized. But one section caught her eye: books on architecture, structural design, and hidden compartments. Curious, Eliza ran her hand along the edge. Click! A soft mechanism released. The bookshelf groaned and slowly swung open, revealing a narrow passageway. Heart pounding, she stepped inside. The hidden room was unlike anything she expected. Walls covered in sketches, letters, blueprints, and journal pages. There were photos of children, dozens of them, some Polaroids, others newspaper clippings, all pinned to corkboards under handwritten captions. Safe now. Adopted 2012. Graduated 2018. In the center of the room stood a desk, cluttered with papers and a blinking computer. And in the far corner, sitting calmly in a worn leather chair, was Harold Mays. His beard was silver, eyes sunken, but alert. He looked at her, not startled, not angry, just tired. "I didn't think anyone would ever find this," he said softly. His first words in 20 years. Eliza stood frozen. "Mr. Mays? Are you okay?" Harold nodded slowly, gesturing to the walls. "It's all here. Everything they need to know." Eliza stepped closer, scanning the documents. Names, addresses, photos of battered shelters and neglected foster homes. Reports of abuse. Letters written by children asking for help. Stacks of evidence tied to cases that had long gone cold. "What is all this?" she whispered. Harold leaned back, eyes far away. "After Lily died, I couldn't face the world. I couldn't teach anymore. But I couldn't sit in silence either. I started reading, learning about children who slipped through the cracks. I found forums, case files, whispered stories. And I realized I could still help. I just had to do it in the shadows." He paused. "I became something else." Over 2 decades, Harold had used his teaching skills, tech knowledge, and relentless drive to quietly investigate and expose child abuse cases across the country. He sent anonymous tips to authorities, tracked movements of dangerous individuals, connected children with organizations that could help them. He never left the house, but his impact traveled far beyond Millfield. "You're telling me you've been saving children all this time?" Eliza asked, her voice trembling. He nodded. "I couldn't save Lily, but maybe I could save someone else's." The revelation rocked the town. When Eliza reported her discovery, local authorities expected a reclusive man with dementia. Instead, they uncovered one of the most prolific and anonymous child advocates in recent history. News outlets descended on Millfield. Headlines spread like wildfire: "The silent hero. The man who spoke through deeds, not words. 20 years of quiet compassion." Harold refused interviews. He didn't want fame. But the files he kept, the thousands of documents, were real. Verified. Many of the children he helped, now adults, began coming forward. There was Maria Gonzalez from Texas, who had been rescued from an abusive foster home after an anonymous tip matched a suspicious detail in a photo. There was Darnell Peters from Ohio, who'd been trafficked across state lines until someone alerted a small-town sheriff with a map and name. There was Ashley, now a social worker herself, who broke down crying on live television, saying, "He saved me. I never knew his name, until now." The town that had once whispered about Harold Mays began to honor him. The mayor issued a commendation. The local school dedicated a library wing in his name. But more than that, people began talking about the children who go unseen, about how silence can be both a prison and a shield, and how healing can look like 100 quiet actions no one ever sees. And Harold? For the first time in 20 years, he stepped outside. The day was bright. The sidewalk warm beneath his shoes. Neighbors gathered, unsure what to say. But Harold simply smiled. He visited the new library wing, sat with the children who read their favorite books aloud, just to make him laugh. He spoke now not often, not loudly, but with kindness and warmth. He even started mentoring teens who were curious about advocacy and law. The room behind his bookshelf remained intact, now a memorial, a museum of sorts. People came from across the country to see where one man, alone and grieving, had changed the lives of hundreds. One spring afternoon, a young girl, no older than Lily had been, walked up to Harold during a community picnic. "Mr. Mays," she said, offering a shy smile. "My name's Claire. I'm safe now. Because of you." Tears welled in his eyes. He knelt beside her, placing a hand over his heart. "I'm glad you're here," he whispered. In that moment, the years of silence melted away. The town, once haunted by the quiet man at the end of the road, now stood in awe of what that silence had hidden, a heart broken, yes, but still beating with purpose. Because sometimes, the loudest voices are the ones that speak not in noise, but in unwavering love. And the greatest heroes? They don't always wear capes. Sometimes, they live behind bookshelves.